Hello, and welcome to this mini lecture on the Conjointly Preference Share Simulator. My name is Stijn Mensel, and today I will be taking you through the simulations of various what-if scenarios. These simulations are the most exciting part of choice-based conjoint, because they allow you to answer important product and pricing questions, such as, what is the amount of interest your new product will generate? What happens to your preference shares if you change a feature? For example, price point, packaging color, claims, or other elements of your product. And what is the price point that will maximize your share revenue, profits, and preference shares? Simulations can help you answer all of these questions. In this video, we will show you how to use the Conjointly online simulator. Imagine your company, Granny's Mix, wants to find the ideal combination of features such as brand, probiotic content claims, packaging material, size, eco-labels, and pricing for a new variety of probiotic yogurts. You would start by specifying the attributes and levels that you are interested in the experimental setup. In this experiment, respondents will be given a choice of 3 different SKUs, as well as a none of the above option. Each SKU is comprised of a combination of features and prices you specify in the setup. Each respondent will be shown approximately 12 screens with different SKU options to choose from. You can also add additional questions such as demographic questions or profiling questions. As you can see, we've already collected around 113 responses for this specific experiment, and we will be using this data as an example that we can explore using the Conjointly simulator. The online simulator is a feature that is part of all generic and brand-specific conjoints, brand price trade-off experiments, product variant selectors, and claim tests. The feature can be found in the Simulator tab of your report. This tab will contain multiple worksheets, with each worksheet containing multiple scenarios. Each scenario consists of a list of specific concepts that are offered to the market. In this example for probiotic yogurts, the first worksheet shows the current market scenarios. These are all the current products on the market with specific features for specific brands. In the second worksheet, we can see the scenario when adding 2 potential new products for Granny's Mix. We can of course also add these together into one worksheet. Here we can see 2 scenarios. Scenario 1 describes the situation of the current market offering, with Granny's Mix only offering 1 SKU. Scenario 2 shows the current market plus the 2 new potential NPDs. These NPDs come with specific features and price points, which were all set up before the experiment was launched. It's incredibly easy to add, delete, copy, and change any concepts in both the scenarios and worksheets. Once you have made your changes, simply recalculate the new scenarios. The simulator can help you answer key business questions, such as understanding share of preference for a new product. First, you can set up your current market scenario and then check what happens when you introduce a new product or NPD. For example, Granny's Mix current product is a plastic package with the probiotic content claim healthy gut bacteria. It's 150 grams, does not have an eco-label, and it sells for $1.90. They're currently thinking of launching an additional NPD, which comes in a glass container, has an eco-label, and is 150 grams for $2.99. We have already set up the current scenario, which includes the current Granny's Mix SKU, as well as all competitors' products. Now we simply create a new scenario by adding the potential new SKU to the baseline scenario. After clicking Recalculate, you will see the preference share distribution for both scenarios. Granny's Mix preference shares increases from 22.7% to 45.1%, with 14% coming from their original SKU and 33.1% coming from their new NPD. The revenue can also be examined by looking on the right-hand side. Here we can see the revenue can be increased from $430 to $1,190, assuming 1,000 units offered. We can also add the second NPD option, which consists of paper packaging, an eco-label, and is 500 grams for $4.99. We can now see what would happen if Granny's Mix decides to launch 2 new NPDs together with their current product. Here we can see that launching NPD 1 seems to have the biggest impact on preference shares. We can also observe what would happen in case Granny's Mix decides to launch only one of the 2 NPDs. Again, we see a larger increase in preference shares when selecting NPD 1. In addition, you can simulate what happens to preference shares if you vary one of the different features. This will help you in selecting the optimal combination of features. Let's see what happens if Granny's Mix decides to change the probiotic content claim. You can either manually select the preferred claim and recalculate, or test all the different levels at once by clicking the feature function. This automatically creates a new scenario displaying the preference shares for each of the levels of this specific feature. In this scenario, we can see that the first probiotic content claim yields the largest preference share. Another cool feature of the simulation tool is that it also allows you to assess price elasticity of demand to find the optimal price point for your specific pricing goals. For example, is your goal to optimize preference shares, to maximize revenue, or have the largest profit margins? In this case, let's calculate price elasticity demand for NPD 1 of Granny's Mix. Simply click the price function and the price elasticity of demand will be shown. If you would like to hide certain SKUs, especially the competitors, to better compare the results for your products, simply click the SKUs on the chart. To get all the SKUs back, simply click Unhide All Concepts. In this case, we can see that the preference share will drop with a price increase, which is extremely common for most FMCGs. Fewer people are willing to buy at a higher price. You can also calculate the price elasticity demand for a specific section of this chart by clicking 2 different price points. Using the specific price points and preference share data, we can also generate a revenue chart, which can be found on the right-hand side. This helps you choose the optimal price point to maximize your revenue. By default, the formula is set to revenue calculation based on 1,000 units offered. However, you can also add a new calculation with better knowledge of your market. In the settings, you can reset the market volume to calculate the revenue, and even include the costs of goods and services to calculate profit margins. For example, if the market volume of probiotic yogurts is set to 100,000 units, we can choose the optimal price point for revenue maximization. In this case, we can see that revenue would be maximized at a price point of $4.15. You can also calculate the profit margins given the market volume and cost of the product. You can account for both variable and fixed costs. Variable costs, such as material and packaging costs, are dependent on the share value and can be added as such. While fixed costs, such as slotting fees, can simply be subtracted at the end of the formula. In this case, if we assume the cost of goods and services is $2.17 per unit, the profit chart suggests that the optimal price point for profit maximization is also $4.15. Now that you have all this pricing information, it's up to you to decide if you aim to go for the highest preference share value, the highest revenue projection, or the highest gross margin projection. Now let's talk about the advanced settings options. To see these options, simply scroll down and click the Show Advanced Settings option. The advanced settings allows you to make special adjustments to your worksheets. The first option relates to the type of product. In this part, you can specify what type of product you are simulating. You can choose between a low-risk or frequently purchased product, such as an FMCG, or a high-risk or seldomly purchased product, such as an education or healthcare insurance. The second section relates to segments. The default simulation is assumed to be run for all responses. However, if you would like to run the simulations for a particular subsegment, please specify the segment that you have set up in the Segmentation tab. This option is ideal to compare different segments within different scenarios. For example, if you want to compare people that indicated being frequent purchasers of probiotic yogurts, compared to those that indicated being infrequent purchasers. The third advanced settings option is to set concept names to match brand names. This tool is useful when you set up a scenario with different brand SKUs so that you don't have to manually type in the brand name each time. This button allows you to simply set the according names easily. You can also drag the SKU into different orders, such as putting the brands together and setting specific colors for specific brands. Next up is market share adjustments. Here you can set up availability adjustments. By default, the results are based on the assumption that each concept will have equal availability. In other words, new SKUs are assumed to have the same availability, shelf space, and mind share as their representative existing SKUs. However, if you already have knowledge about the availability of a new SKU, you can set the relative availability to adjust the preference shares. Relative availability, which is the adjustment factor, can be calculated based on observed volume shares. After this is calculated, you can apply this adjustment to preferences and you can change the relative availability based on your knowledge. For example, if you already know that MPD1 will only get half of the availability compared to Granny's Mix current offering, you can set the relative availability to 50 to calculate the simulated preference shares. As a result, the potential preference share for MPD1 changes from 31.1% to 19.3%, while the current SKU offering from Granny's Mix goes from 14 to 16.9%. Next up is check sensitivity to removal of concepts. In case you want to simplify your product line, you probably would like to check sensitivity by removing each concept, instead of having to manually remove each concept one by one. Check sensitivity to removal of concepts is ideal in this situation, as it allows you to set different scenarios that automatically remove one concept at a time up to the number of concepts you would like to remove. For example, let's say we want to check what happens if we remove either Granny's Mix current offering, MPD1, or MPD2. We simply select these options, click Recalculate, and observe the new results. Here we can see what happens if instead of offering 3 products, we remove one of the options. As you can see, removing Granny's Mix's current offering actually has the least impact on preference shares, compared to removing MPD1, which has the biggest impact, and MPD2, which is in the middle. Similarly, you can do this process once again to see what happens if you would only launch one concept, with MPD1 being the clear victor in this situation. Alternatively, if you do not want to remove concepts one by one, but simply want to see which one concept works best, use the check sensitivity to inclusion of only one concept button. Once again, we can see that MPD1 yields the highest preference shares. The Group of Concepts option allows you to import or add different concepts from other scenarios. In this case, let's see what happens if we add the 2 potential MPDs to the current market offering. To do this, we simply select the group of concepts to add, in this case the scenario that contains both NPDs, and then click Simulate. Now we can see the results of the current market with the 2 MPDs added. The next useful function is the scale factor. The scale factor exponent is a numerical expression that allows you to adjust the steepness or flatness of share preference in order to reflect the actual reality of market shares. When it comes to the scale factor, a value close to 0 indicates that preference shares should be divided almost equally among all products. As you can see here, all concepts have a roughly equal preference share value. Once the scale factor, also known as the k-value, approaches 1, preference share distribution is identical to that predicted by the multinomial logistic regression. For k-values larger than 1, the differences in preference shares become more distinct. When the k-value becomes sufficiently large, this approach becomes analogous to high-risk simulations. We recommend using very small k-values, so values close to 0, in highly impulsive markets, where people generally don't care about things like brand, price, or pack design. The k-value should be increased towards 1 when there is some degree of impulsive behavior. For example, FMCGs, where attributes such as brand, price, promotion, pack design, and claims do matter. Finally, we recommend using k-values larger than 1 when the market is closer to a high-risk context. So these are markets where people tend to select the single most preferred product, even when it is only marginally more preferred than the next best product. Markets where you typically have a high K value are things like housing, cars, or computers. The enable segmentation, based on preferences for concepts in this scenario function, allows you to segment results based on a particular simulation. To create a segment, simply click on the button, go to the Segmentations tab, add a new segmentation, and click on Segregation based on simulation. Here you can select the new variable you just created, and from the value function, you can select respondents who would buy certain concepts within each specific scenario. In addition, you can set up different rules using the operator functions, such as individuals that did not prefer specific concepts or other elements like pricing. The second to last function is correlation of individual preference shares. This function analyzes the correlation for participants' individual preference shares for different concepts in each scenario. By clicking View Correlation Matrix, we can see individual preferences for different concepts. This matrix gives insight into if respondents liked one concept, do they also prefer another one. In this scenario, we can see the 8 concepts tested on both the X and the Y axis, and the numerical values indicate the relationship between them. A correlational value between 0 and 1 indicates the shared positive relationship. If you like one concept, you also like the other. On the other hand, a correlational value between 0 and -1 indicates a negative relationship. Ergo, if you like one concept, you probably don't like the other option. This feature can be incredibly useful when you want to select 2 concepts that work well together, or select 2 concepts that might aim at different segments of the market. The final advanced setting is the Investigate Source of Business function. This function allows you to find out where would your NPD source its preference shares from. This is incredibly useful to figure out if your NPD would cannibalize your current market shares. To set this up, simply select the baseline scenario and the new scenario you want to compare the baseline with. The resulting graph shows the difference between the baseline and new scenario. Positive values indicate an increase in preference shares from baseline to the new scenario, whereas negative values indicate a loss of preference shares between the baseline and new scenario. By hovering over the graph, you can also clearly see which brands are most affected between the baseline and new scenario. As a final note, any graphs, charts, or worksheets can be easily exported to either Excel, PowerPoint, or even as PNG files. To do so, simply go to the object you wish to export, select the export function, and wait for a download pop-up to appear. Additionally, you can also select multiple worksheets to export into one file. To do so, click the Add to Export icon, select which elements you want to add, for example the data dump or even the interactive simulator, and then select Make Excel file or Make PowerPoint file. Then wait for the download file to complete and select your download location. Once the file has been downloaded, you can open the Excel file and conduct any additional analyses you wish to perform, with the various tabs at the bottom indicating your selected worksheets. Thank you for joining me today and learning how to use the Conjointly online simulator. As always, Conjointly is here to help with any questions and requests you may have, and please feel free to book a call with our team.